Welcome to the Insomnia Coach podcast. My name is Martin Reed. I believe that nobody needs to live with chronic insomnia and that evidence-based cognitive and behavioral techniques can help you enjoy better sleep for the rest of your life. The content of this podcast is provided for informational and educational purposes only. It's not medical advice and is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease, disorder, or medical condition. It should never replace any advice given to you by your physician or any other licensed healthcare provider. Insomnia Coach LLC offers coaching services only and does not provide therapy, counseling, medical advice, or medical treatment. The statements and opinions expressed by guests are their own and are not necessarily endorsed by Insomnia Coach LLC. All content is provided as is and without warranties, either express or implied. In 2019, Jovana experienced a night of no sleep whatsoever, but she was confident that she would get some sleep the following night. However, the next night was just the same. Jovana didn't get 1 minute of sleep. At this point, she started to panic and her anxiety was further compounded by the fact she was a new mum. Jovana started to dread going to bed. She felt frustrated. She felt lonely. Fortunately, she found the Insomnia Coach YouTube channel and the Insomnia Coach podcast and started to realize that she was not alone and that her insomnia was not unusual or unique. Ultimately, Jovana stopped the endless sleep-related research and ongoing detective work. She stopped experimenting with medication and supplements. She started to remove herself from the process of sleep and began to accept that sleep cannot be controlled. At the same time, she committed to actions that helped her move toward the kind of life she wanted to live, even after difficult nights, and even in the presence of difficult thoughts, feelings, and emotions. As a result, Jovana regained confidence in her natural ability to sleep and is once again living the kind of life she wants to live. A full transcript of this podcast and an accompanying video can be found at insomniacoach.com/podcast. Hello, Jovana. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come onto the podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you, Martin.
So I'm going to start right at the beginning, just like I do with all my podcast guests. So can you just tell us when your sleep problems first began and what do you think caused your initial issues with sleep?
So it first began, I think I know exactly the date, it's so weird, right? You remember some things like very precisely. I think it was like the 13th of December, and I think it was a weekend. You can recall and check if you'd want to check. I think it was 2019, 13th of December, and it happened for me 2 nights in a row that I couldn't sleep. So I really remember it's the first time it began because before that I would have like bad nights of sleep, but I wouldn't panic and I wouldn't react the way I did when it happened then in December. So basically, I had the feeling like I couldn't sleep. So like I was just laying down in my bed. I even tried to go to the couch, try to sleep there. I just like nothing was happening. I didn't sleep like a minute, which never happened to me before. Because even if I had a bad night and I couldn't fall asleep, at some point, let's say 4 or 5 a.m., I would fall asleep eventually,
Yeah.
This didn't happen then, and I didn't know why. And then the night afterwards, I was sure I would sleep because, I still had this belief like sleep is natural. It happens at some point if you're tired. It didn't. And then it hit me really hard because I really thought like there's something wrong with me. Like there must be, because I just had my baby a few months before. My son was born in August 2019, and I believed that maybe some hormonal imbalance was the cause, or maybe the reason why. I don't know. The thing is, I wasn't informed very much about sleep and like all those things. Even melatonin wasn't a word for me. I just thought like there must be some chemical in your body that allows you to sleep, and if you don't have that, it doesn't work. So I really started thinking, yeah, I have a problem now. And it happened. So eventually the third night I would sleep.
Mm-hmm.
But then I remember I talked to some friends and I was like, whoa, can you imagine 2 nights in a row? Who had that? And I felt pretty lonely because I only had one friend who had it. And I think that's one of the problems I had at this time, is not knowing anyone who was going or experiencing those things. So I started to panic. I Googled. And then, oh God, you can find anything on Google. So it happened a few nights after, maybe just even a week afterwards, I couldn't sleep again. And there was no apparent reason for me not to sleep, because it's not as if I did something different on that day. It's not as if I overslept the days before. I couldn't. I had a baby, so it was like my baby was waking me up anyway. Like I was sleep deprived from my baby, so I thought like, this is not normal. Something must be really bad with my health, you know. But like the root cause, I think now, is not this hormonal thing. I really believe it was just stress and anxiety, which was kind of there the whole time, you know. But I wasn't really aware of it. And this is why when it happened again, I know now, but this is like really in hindsight. I couldn't say that back then, you know, but like when it kept on happening, like Christmas, I still had this problem. It was like, oh, it went on basically until this year, beginning of this year. So kept on coming and happening, and I couldn't figure out what was the cause. But like now I would say, I think it's more stress related, and that my arousal system, as you told me, is called, that this thing wouldn't just come down, you know, like I wouldn't calm down in the evening. And yeah, and what's interesting is I don't know why I wouldn't notice that this was the cause. You know what I mean? Looking backwards now, I believe like, God, it was so obvious, like it was stress, you know. But why would you think something's, you know, it's very weird to me even now to understand why somebody gets so lost with their thinking, you know. It's like you take a wrong path and then yeah,
it's really easy to do. Did you ever have issues with sleep before that period of December 2019?
Yeah, so I think I would say, but not a lot, I would say maybe, I don't know, twice per year. So like really rare, you know. I would have a bad night where I would like think about stuff, and then I noticed like, ooh, it's already 2 a.m. I'm still not sleeping. Ooh, this is bad. I have to wake up in the morning. How am I going to do that? You know, this kind of thing. But as I said, like 4 or 5 or maybe even 6 a.m. at some point I would sleep. And eventually like my brain would stop think about those things, I guess. And then I would sleep.
Yeah.
So, and this was rare. I didn't call myself insomniac. I didn't even know really what this was, you know. And then I started to call myself, I think I'm an insomniac now, you know, when I had it a couple of times, because it was just, I remember I was saying, but I don't belong to those people, you know, as if it's something really bad, you know.
Yeah.
I really had this feeling, no, this is not me. And why is it happening to me? And I couldn't figure out. And oh God, and then I developed all the other problems like sleep anxiety. And I think this is the worst part, because I already was anxious because of my baby, being a new mom, blah, 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 the whole things. And then the sleep anxiety made my life horrible, because I was dreading going to bed. Like even maybe just thinking about when the evening begins, you know, 6 p.m. already, ooh, should I go at 8 p.m. tonight to try to compensate? Or, you know, and this behavior began, and oh, wow. And I remember I was like having, like I show always in my tummy, because it's somewhere there, this stress ball or something, you know, it's holding you. And like, I was really anxious, just thinking, okay, I'm going to go to bed and it's not going to work. And then what's going to happen? I'm going to have another night without sleep. And wow, that's the worst, really. And the lonely part, feeling lonely. This component, I think it was something that really wasn't helping me, because I figured when I discovered later on your podcast, your videos on YouTube, the whole class, everything, this helped a lot and very fast. Like just, I know, I remember the first week I was watching like at least like 5 videos of yours, either hearing podcasts or just some explanation videos. And I felt already a support just by knowing, okay, other people are having the same things. They're experiencing the same symptoms, or they are calling themselves insomniacs. So like, this thing I think is what I missed. And I'm sad I didn't find this out before,
Yeah, I think you touched on a great point about how we can just so easily get caught up in our thoughts, and a lot of it is to do with that, especially that anxiety of what each night will bring. And I think something that some people listening to here will identify with, and I'm really glad you mentioned it, was the fact that back in December 2019, apart from the fact that you had a baby a few months before that, when those sleep issues kind of cropped up, there didn't seem to be an obvious cause of them. And that in itself can be quite concerning, right? And lead us down this rabbit hole of really starting to worry that maybe there's a chemical imbalance or there's something uniquely wrong. We've lost that magical chemical or that ability to sleep. And the reason I'm really glad you mentioned that is because sometimes there are obvious causes of sleep disruption, and that can be quite comforting. But sometimes there's not, and that can be where we can get caught up in our thoughts then. But the fact of the matter is, it really doesn't matter what the initial trigger of that sleep disruption is, because we can't eliminate those from our lives. There are always going to be some nights where we have difficult nights. Sometimes it's an obvious reason why, but sometimes not. But it's when we get caught up as a result of those difficult nights and start to worry, really start to feel anxious about what each night will bring, and start to modify our behaviors in response, in a bid to try and protect our sleep or to make sleep happen. That's when the real problems can start. And that's why it's really helpful to kind of move away from trying to figure out the trigger and instead just work on all those thoughts and behaviors that can perpetuate the sleep disruption.
Yeah, but even before after I Googled, obviously, first I Googled, but then quite quickly, after a few months, let's say just after Christmas, so it began December, as I said, I think 13th, so middle of December, and then I waited Christmas, it was bad, and everything was bad January. I think even already in January, I went to the doctor, and okay, obviously not all doctors are bad, but like her advice was pretty bad for me, because the first thing she gave me was sleeping pills. Like, obviously, not even the ones you buy, like over the counter, some herbs or stuff, like, how do you call it in Valerian is like it's a drug I use. It's like a Valerian. Valerian, do you know
Valerian,
this?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So not even that. She went full on and gave me really a prescription of sleeping pills. And she was like, nah, if you take once per week, it's fine. And obviously this concept of like, I'm going to have one night of good sleep per week, this is already triggering your anxiety, because you think like, okay, I cannot do more than one because I'm going to be addicted and it's dangerous, and like, I don't know. I felt like really this was a bad idea to start with that,
Yeah.
And the fact that she didn't, she also said she didn't want to test all, because I was mentioning my thought, like, okay, probably hormonal imbalance, some chemicals, the magical chemical that doesn't work anymore. And she said it's very hard actually to, when you do a blood test, like, or you just want to, go for a check. She said it's quite hard to identify where, if there is a problem really, in the hormones or something. She was also saying there is a kind of no way to know precisely if you really have this this biological problem, or chemical problem in your body. So this also left me like, okay, must be like, we won't know, but it's probably that, like it contributed to it was just worse.
Yeah. I think there's two great points that you made there. The first and foremost is that we kind of sometimes can see sleeping pills as being this kind of magical elixir, the solution to everything, but they can also come with their own issues. Like you said, if I'm only allowed to take them one night a week, does that mean that I'm just not going to sleep for the other 6? Then you've got this idea that sometimes they can reinforce this assumption or this belief that we can't sleep without some kind of external help, some external crutch. And then just this drifting off into the detective work. You know, there's some mystery going on. I've got to investigate it. Is it chemicals? Is it hormones? Is it this or is it that? And often it's that ongoing detective work that can really kind of trap us and lead us down this slippery slope, and it can kind of just consume our lives, and we're just spending every waking minute just thinking or investigating what could be the problem here.
Yeah, exactly. Because for me, it wasn't normal that she would just prescribe those sleeping pills. I thought, like, we need to figure out what's the root cause. I wanted to know, So it really, what you say, it really triggered my detective mode, and I kept on Googling, and I thought maybe she doesn't know everything. I need to seek somebody who's really professional, like a generalist, a doctor who really is just for sleep. So I Googled that. But it's funny how I didn't think of this. How do you say TBCI?
CBTI.
Yes. In French is another way. But yeah, so the behavioral therapy, nobody mentioned that. She didn't mention that,
Yeah, it's a real shame, and your story is really familiar, unfortunately, that we have this magical collection of techniques, these cognitive and behavioral techniques, which is just a fancy way of saying we can explore the thought processes that can perpetuate sleep disruption, and we can tackle the behaviors that we implement that can perpetuate sleep disruption. And when we take that kind of two-pronged approach, it's really helpful and really effective with chronic insomnia. And it's usually recommended as the first line treatment for chronic insomnia as well. But unfortunately, we have an issue where a lot of doctors just don't know about it. Often through no fault of their own, because the training just isn't there most of the time. And also we have an access problem. So even doctors that are familiar with the techniques, they don't really have the time available to work through these techniques one-on-one with their clients. And there's not many people they can refer these patients out to either. So we have a real problem in terms of knowledge and accessibility of these techniques. And they're not, we don't need to shroud them in mystery. The techniques themselves are pretty straightforward. They can definitely be challenging to implement, but we don't need to really ring fence access to them. They can be straightforward. People can implement them independently. And if we can put all of our efforts into implementing those techniques instead of all the things that can lead us astray, like this ongoing detective work, doing all that researching, all that doctor Googling, it can be so helpful. And I like to emphasize this because we can get caught in this trap through no fault of our own. We can do everything right. We can go to the doctor, we can look online, we can do our research, but we can get trapped or caught up because there's a lack of information out there on the good stuff, the stuff that works. And we have challenges in terms of access to the good stuff as well.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. So I think you touched upon like the kind of issues that you were having. It was like you would just be worrying about sleep all day long, and then we would normally expect, let's say if you didn't have insomnia, we would normally expect that after a night or two, maybe things would get back on track. You'd have those nights of catch up sleep, but it sounds like that didn't really happen for you. Well, what were you finding was a kind of typical night? Was it issues just first falling asleep, or was it waking during the night and finding it hard to fall back to sleep, or maybe it was both?
It was both. It started with the falling asleep, which I think was the main cause of my anxiety then, because it was the worst part, like, just dreading going to bed. But I also had, and this happened, I don't know exactly when, because it's hard to say, because as I say, I wasn't sleeping through my night anyway because of my baby. So like even just breastfeeding or just, waking up to change my baby or something made me like, sometimes I couldn't fall back asleep, but I didn't think about that until I had my insomnia. And then when this happened, like I could really notice, I knew like sometimes if my son would wake me up at 2 or 3 a.m., I wouldn't sleep until the rest. Even if I had fallen asleep first, somehow, and I didn't understand why, falling back asleep, like it didn't work. So I would wake up, I do what I have to do, and then go back to bed. And then I just couldn't sleep. Even if maybe in this moment, anxiety wasn't there. So this is also why, because I started to analyze, because I was obviously then conscious, okay, I am stressed when I go to bed. Now obviously I am stressed. And I try to do relaxation techniques and stuff like that. And also mentioning this valerian, because I didn't take those real sleeping pills for a long time because I was scared. And obviously didn't work with the whole concept of I'm not sleeping 5 days and I have one night. What's the point, So I quit this, but then I tried to do a cure with valerian, and this was kind of helping the time I was taking it, because I felt less stressed, I guess. So this is good because it worked on that. But then the falling back asleep, asleep when in the middle of the night, this started not working. Kind of like really, it was obvious, like, wow, there's something wrong now. So this must be again another, you always kind of try to analyze and to figure out what's the root cause. And if something works, like the stress part, it's a bit relieved or diminished through this medication. So then what's next? Why is still something wrong, Oh God, when I think about it, I might not sleep enough. But like, this is just, I don't know, it was a very, very bad time. So many, bad memories of this. All the things I tried, because it's not the only thing. After I finished 3 months of valerian, obviously I went off, and I think maybe for a week it was kind of fine again. But then I would eventually have another night where I didn't sleep for a minute. And then I knew, okay, so I'm back on this. And I tried melatonin. I took it also. First of all, I figured this works. And I don't know, in hindsight, I don't know why it worked, because I don't believe much in melatonin now after the whole experiences I had. But it did work also, maybe, how do you say, punctually. So I would take it one time if I noticed I'm not falling asleep. And usually I do quite fast. If I am falling asleep, it's very fast. So after maybe 20 minutes, I'm it's not going to happen. So I think it's more a psychological effect that it had on me. So I would just take it. Maybe it's that by then it's maybe 11:30. I would take it and it still worked. And this is where I think it's maybe a placebo effect. It helped me to reduce maybe my anxiety, or just it made me believe this thing could make me sleep,
Yeah.
And I was on and off. And then again, I went to a naturopath. You say naturopath? It's yes. And she recommended not taking it the way I did, because obviously it was already a couple of months. I was going like this, 6 months. And she said, I think you need a cure, because probably, and this is where, again, I fell back in my detective mode and hole. And she said, maybe you have a deficiency or some in the hypophyse. How do you say hypophyse? Oh, pineal gland. I think.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe this one's not producing enough. Maybe you even have serotonin. A lack of serotonin. She was mentioning a lot of stuff there. And she didn't really analyze or check it properly, but she was saying, we don't need to find out and run some tests. We can just take the cure. You do again 3 months of it, of melatonin every night. And she was like, you need to go strong. You need to start with 5 milligrams and you go on 3 months, and then you'll go back down. And basically she thought this will teach my brain to produce it again in case it wasn't. And I remember I was thinking oh God, we're back again on something, and then I already knew I was dreading the moment I was to go off of it. And I think it's exactly at this point that I found out your podcast and your videos, because I contacted you also and asked about this, how do I do that? Because I was I reduced from 5, then 3, 2, 1, and then this is ridiculous, but I was taking even a quarter of one pill. So I reduced from one pill of 1 milligram. First I did a half, then I had to cut into a quarter. And at the end, I was still kind of biting off a little corner, of this quarter of a pill. And I was I'm so ridiculous, but I'm so thinking I'm not going to sleep if I don't take any.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I have this addictive profile, people who are addicted to stuff easily, or just mentally thinking they need it. And oh God, I couldn't go off. And if I wouldn't sleep. So then I had my response, I had my confirmation. I'm not sleeping without melatonin. So what do I do now, you know?
Yeah, you know, that whole just listening to you describe that whole experience of sitting there, and maybe we need to address this serotonin, maybe you need to have all this melatonin, maybe we need this and that. It made me start to feel anxious just imagining myself in that situation. Yeah. So, and I think you raised another great point there as well, and it's when we end up taking supplements or over-the-counter stuff or anything, it could be prescription medication even, it can lead us to it can reinforce this belief that we need something to generate sleep. And then, like you said, especially if we're taking it contingently. So, for example, we're not planning on taking anything tonight. We're going to see how the night goes. And then if we do find that we're struggling, then we might reach for whatever it is we're taking. That can be problematic too, because first and foremost, we're kind of setting up a little test for ourselves. Are we going to fall asleep pretty quickly, or are we going to fall back to sleep? So that in itself just keeps the brain a little bit more active. It has to monitor more for sleep and wakefulness. That can make sleep more difficult. And then let's say we do reach for whatever it is we've got close by. If we do then fall asleep, we've kind of reinforced this belief that that thing is generating sleep. If we don't fall asleep easily, then we're just reinforcing this belief that there's something is seriously wrong with us and that we've kind of lost the ability to sleep. So really, there's no lasting positive outcome to these things. They can really be one of these traps that we can get caught up in.
Interesting, as you mentioned this thing of how do you say, self-monitoring. You're kind of observing yourself and trying to see if like you are going to fall asleep or not, but it happens unconsciously, right? And I didn't know this was a thing as well. And I remember it happened also maybe, let's say, summer 2020. So December 2019, first time, and then a few months later, I remember I had this for the first time, when it's not just this twinge like normal ones you have when you fall asleep. It's honestly like my heart would start racing like so fast, and I was feeling so alert and stressed at the same time. I was relaxed the second before, so I didn't know where this came from, and I didn't know how to explain it. I remember I was saying this to some friends, the friend who had insomnia, for example, and she didn't have those things. But she also didn't like to talk much about insomnia because I think it was contributing to her anxiety as well. So I was lonely anyway. And so I remember this feeling of just going to bed, even noticing, this is the thing, you're noticing that you're falling asleep, which normally doesn't happen. And then you have your heart just start racing. And it wasn't a physical twinge necessarily, like the thing you have sometimes. It was really, I was like, oh, what's happening? And my heart was pumping so fast.
Yeah.
And luckily you described it in your videos, because this, just acknowledging the fact that this is a normal thing, or is a part like of your brain wanting to be actually nice and reward you and tell you, okay, look, you're falling asleep. Just like after a few nights after I learned about this concept, like self-monitoring, I noticed like it will like fade off. It faded off and I didn't have it anymore, luckily. So yeah, because this was also a very bad thing. It will happen, I don't know, maybe 15 times before I gave up even trying to sleep then, because it was so uncomfortable,
Yeah. Yeah. I think in hindsight, all these things, and once we have an explanation for them, it can be so reassuring. But before we don't know what we don't know, right? And so if we don't know what the explanation for these things is, it can just lead to more worry that there is something uniquely wrong, or that there's something dangerous going on. Whereas really it's just a manifestation. It's just a symptom of just heightened arousal, whether it's thought-based, just thinking about sleep, putting pressure on ourselves to sleep, monitoring for sleep, or all the physical symptoms of heightened arousal, which is like a racing heart, feeling cold, feeling hot, sweaty, all those things. These are all kind of normal reactions to heightened arousal. It's basically the body trying to protect us from what it sees as a threat, which is wakefulness, not falling asleep. The body can't really differentiate between, of real physical threat and just kind of an imagined one or just a mental threat. But the reaction is the same. So the body's kind of gearing us up to fight or to run away. And that's not really helpful when we want to be setting the stage for sleep.
Yeah, definitely. And not only that, I also noticed how I could fall asleep on my couch, and I was really sleepy, and yeah, I even fell asleep maybe for a few minutes, and then I would go to my bedroom, and not even the part where you are falling asleep, just the fact that I would go into my bed, like on my mattress, this was already enough to make me fully awake, aroused. Like I was, I didn't understand. And this is the other thing that helped to understand when you explained the conditioning, or how do you call it? Yeah. Conditioning your brain has like associating the fact that you're not sleeping in your bed. So now we're going to be awake in our bed.
Yeah.
And it seems now, really in hindsight, it seems so obvious, but at back at the time, I thought something was, as you say, uniquely wrong with me. This is exactly the words I was using, to say, I have a unique problem. Something's really wrong, and I'll never find out,
Yeah. I think it's really helpful you just explaining all this and just talking a bit about it, because like you said, it's that worry that something is uniquely wrong with us. But the fact of the matter is, insomnia from person to person is almost identical. So I just know from my own experience that so many people listening to this are going to be like, oh my goodness, she is telling me I'm hearing exactly what I'm experiencing. And that in itself,
I found your videos, I was like, oh God, I have this finally.
Yeah, and that can be so reassuring, right? Just to realize that you're not alone, what you're going through isn't unique, and that we don't have to be looking for all the answers. There are simple explanations to everything that you're experiencing.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, I just wanted to go back really briefly about, that the trials and tribulations of trying to come off that melatonin. You were reducing the dose. You decided, because I remember you actually sending me an email about you really wanted to just get off this melatonin, this supplement, and you were just going smaller dose, smaller dose, smaller dose, tiny little nibble off the edge of the pill. But you went through that experience where when you had that night where there was no melatonin, then you'd have difficulty sleeping. So it makes it really hard, right? To then have that confidence to maybe go a second night or a third night with no melatonin. It's so much easier to just bring it back into our lives. So how did you shift away from that? How are you where we are today, where I'm guessing, maybe I'm assuming wrong, you don't have a big pile of melatonin pills right next to you?
No. I'm completely off since a few months. I think I stopped in February, it was, I guess. I'm not sure exactly the months of this year when, but it went. So that's the thing. I wasn't paying much attention because I was like healing from this problem, and it was just, happening smoothly. And then, this why I'm not counting exactly the days, but I think it was beginning of the year. And how I finally managed is just because I took your class, honestly. So when I think I emailed you, or I watched a few videos, a few people interviews on your podcast, and this reduced the anxiety level a lot. And I remember I would even watch them before going to bed, sometimes twice the same, just about this twinges, because it was a big problem of mine. I was really sure nobody has that. It's unique. It's very weird. And just to, have you say again and again, like, okay, this is normal. This is something that happens. And like, this reduced the stress level. So remember, then I emailed you, and then you responded something very smart. It was, what do you think if you would go off melatonin now, and you would force yourself to not sleep? Not that you were recommending me to do that, like suggesting I should, not that, but you say, imagine just if you would force yourself not to sleep for like 5 or 6 nights in a row, do you think you still wouldn't be able to sleep with your water of a pill, And I remember this kind of, triggered my motivation to really say, okay, God, it's so obvious, let's just try now. And I think I kind of succeeded, maybe not the first night after this, because I needed to kind of integrate this information and probably rewatch a few videos saying always the same things, but like just to, accept those facts and integrate them. And then I think stress level was reduced enough So actually, I wasn't self-monitoring me, or my brain wasn't monitoring. And then I fell asleep, and it wasn't enough after one night, because I think, a very anxious person in general. So I would still think, okay, maybe one night, but I needed to have maybe a week of good nights to be able to build the self-confidence. I think it didn't happen after one success. It's like you need to have a lot of successes to just so that there's an overweight, of this compared to what you've been experiencing since like 2 years. So took a while, but I was watching, as I said, a couple of times. Just for me, I need to have this, like somebody telling me things a couple of times, and so I integrate them quite well. And then, it reassures me. I'm not alone. Other people are going through this.
Yeah.
Other people healed, or it's not even healing. It's, I guess, you understand things and you integrate them, and then you kind of, you liberate yourself from all those beliefs, It's not even you needed to heal. I didn't need to heal from something, or maybe from my mental beliefs. But like, it's not a healing that happened. It's just some kind of integration of this information, and which reduced the stress, anxiety, and slowly my brain stopped monitoring. I think that's what helped, because that was about the falling asleep, at the beginning of the night. But then in the middle of the night, sometimes I would have, again, where I couldn't fall back to sleep, especially if it was early morning, let's say 4 or 5 a.m. 5 a.m. for sure, I wouldn't sleep anymore. But then again, this knowing you brought was reducing your sleep window. And then I knew, even before I tried to reduce it, I knew, like, okay, so it just means maybe I'm rested, or it's enough for tonight. And just this thing of accepting that maybe I don't need to count 8 hours on the clock to be, this helped. Because, as I say, the first part of falling asleep was about having less stress, like anxiety, not thinking of monitoring myself. But this didn't heal or like help the other problem immediately, which was fine, because my worst nightmare was just going to bed. So when this was done, I was kind of okay with sometimes like just waking up at 4 a.m. or 5, and then I would lay in bed, but I wasn't stressed anymore, I was like, okay, maybe I'll sleep, maybe not. At some point, 6 a.m., I'll wake up anyway, or just, and it's fine. And we didn't touch on that, but that was a big part also of my understanding, like not needing to focus on those 8 hours, which was, by the way, the advice I got from the doctor, because obviously sleeping pills, but also sleep hygiene. Like, she informed me of all those things which just contributed to my anxiety again, and it wasn't helping me. So the fact that you kind of broke down all those elements of sleep hygiene was very, very good, to just not be stressed if in the middle of the night I'm not sleeping anymore. And then I tried. Eventually, I remember I refused to do the sleep restriction, because I thought, since I still have a small child that's waking me up at some point in the night, I'm not going to restrict too much, because I didn't know how to, because sometimes I'll be up anyway for like twice in a night. So like, it wasn't eventually really going to help me. But at some point I realized, okay, if I'm always awake at 5, I could easily go maybe to sleep 1 hour later, and I'll wake up maybe at 6. You know what I mean? Like, I did a bit of the sleep restriction, but not forcing it too much. And eventually I would still sleep maybe 8 or 9 hours, because I'm quite tired with in general with my child, I guess. And then some nights I do sleep 9 hours, and it's fine. But some others, I'm happily awake at 5:30, and my day begins, and it's even like bonus time. So I'm not stressed about this part anymore, for sure.
I think there's kind of a common theme in everything that you've mentioned there, and I think it comes down to control. Our desire to control sleep, whether that's through medication or supplements, or trying to fall asleep, trying to get 8 hours of sleep, trying to sleep and naturally wake up at, say, 7 a.m. instead of 5 a.m. Implementing all these different sleep hygiene techniques or rituals. All of these things really can just be distilled down into, we're trying to control sleep. And as you can probably tell, just now looking back, you're able to do that. It all just comes down to our desire to control sleep, which is not helpful. It just increases arousal, makes sleep more difficult, because sleep ultimately is something we can't control. It's a natural process. And it's when we try and get involved in the process that we tend to see sleep becoming more difficult than it needs to be.
Yeah, definitely. And not to mention it, if I had like a very bad night, which means for me back then I wouldn't sleep at all. I remember I was like calling in sick, like, or not for work, but like just some things I had planned, even with some friends, or nice stuff, just easy going things. Those ones I would cancel, especially if it's on the night following, like on the evening following my bad night. So I was like, oh no, I need to catch up on that sleep, so I'll go to bed extra early. And it's funny because I think from all the things that I've been through with insomnia, where I'm now, so I'm going to bed whatever time I want. I'm not even thinking about it. I'm falling asleep immediately, as I always was before. So I feel completely cured. But the only thing is, sometimes I notice, and it's interesting, is especially with the friend thing, like if I have friends over or the dinner goes a bit longer or something, and sometimes I have like a thought about how I used to think before. So like it's maybe already 11 p.m., which is a bit late for me because usually I need some time to get to bed, like shower, everything. So I know I already think about like, okay, won't be before midnight until I'm home, showered, and in my bed. And I still have this, in the morning, I only have 6 hours allotted for sleep, because I decided to have fun. So I still have this little thing sometimes coming up in my mind, and I'm thinking, okay. But usually what I do then, and I think it's a very good recommendation for if you are cured and you still have those problems at some point, I immediately think of everything I learned, like, okay, so we're not going to control sleep. We're not going to try, it will happen naturally. And luckily I had, I think, enough months behind me of success where it didn't happen at all anymore. So I kind of relate to that, and I think, okay, I'm not controlling anything, and look, it works. It's just natural. And just like, repeating those things help me.
Yeah. I think what was really helpful there was just the way you were talking about, you'd sometimes call in sick after difficult nights, or you'd even cancel plans with friends, and those kind of things, they're completely understandable, why we would do them. But what typically then happens is, what are we doing instead? So let's say, for example, we call in sick from work. Now we're just kind of sitting at home and we don't have any kind of distractions. What are we going to do? We're going to start probably thinking and worrying about sleep, maybe firing up Dr. Google again, maybe even just trying to take a nap, maybe. Maybe we're going to be more sedentary. All these things can kind of make us feel more fatigued, can generate more anxiety, more worry. And when we remove good stuff from our lives, like those plans with friends, we reinforce this connection between difficult night equals difficult day. And definitely difficult nights can make the days more difficult, but we also have quite a lot of control over the quality of our days independently of sleep. Often what happens to us during the day, or what we do during the day, has more of an influence on the quality of our day, rather than this being completely 100 predetermined by how the night goes. So if we're able to still go into work maybe, or if we're able to still go out with friends and go about our days as normally as possible, it can really help us come to that realization that a difficult night might not be the end of the world. It might not make the next day a complete disaster. There's still an opportunity to be productive, or to have some good moments, or even just some okay moments after difficult nights. And then that in turn, maybe then we might put a little bit less pressure on ourselves to sleep, and feel, be less likely to get caught up in all those anxious sleep-related thoughts.
That's not so easy, I have to say, because I remember I think now I can apply what you're saying and not cancel something because I have this information in the background, but like, if I would do that, I tried sometimes. I was just, okay, so good. I'm going anyway. And my evening, I mean, it was COVID time anyway, so it wasn't like partying or whatever. It was more like just staying up late at some friends or having friends over. And I remember I couldn't enjoy it as much as I used to. You know what I mean? Even if I forced myself to do that, I would still have the anxiety because I knew, oh God, so really this means I'm not going to bed before maybe 1 a.m. or, which this is also the hard part. Even if you shouldn't cancel, like how do you still enjoy something you will bring some stress and anxiety and worrying,
Yeah, definitely. I think what can be helpful there is to kind of ask ourselves a question, and it would be something along the lines of, is this behavior helping me live the life I want to live? So, for example, if you're tempted to cancel those plans with friends, is canceling those plans helping you live the kind of life you want to live? If it is, then that's fine. You don't need to make it. Then cancel those plans. If it's not, then why would you want to cancel those plans?
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. I think I'm going to keep this one because, as I say, sometimes even now, by the end of an evening or something, and if it's late, I would still have those thoughts like, "Ooh, it's late." This. I think this is so funny because I think there are really groups of people. Either you're born with this, I have the feeling, or you're maybe educated. Like you get it from your parents or from. I was thinking, did I get this from my parents? And I think I did because I remember my dad was always saying, you need to go to bed. Like I was maybe 3 or 4 or 5. I don't know exactly because the memory is a bit blurred, but like it was like, you need to go to sleep now because otherwise, you'll be very tired tomorrow. And I think this is something that like it's ingrained, or how do you say, like it's seeded. It's like a seed they put in your involuntarily, like unconsciously, but it can have this thing. This is why I say there are two groups of people: the ones who don't even look what time it is when they go to bed, and even if they need to wake up at 5, 6 a.m. very early to go to work, if there's a nice movie, something on the TV or something they're watching, it's 2 a.m. They don't care. They just go to bed when it's finished. You know what I mean? Those people.
Yeah.
I was never this type of people anyway. So I was always like, oh, okay, so I have to allow myself to be able to sleep at least like 7, 8 hours, So this thing, I think it comes already from my childhood or something. Like either my parents kind of taught me somehow because they think, ooh, the next day, if you don't sleep enough, it's bad things are happening to you. Like I think this is why I say there are two groups of people. I really believe if you're already in this category of somebody who's very conscious about how many hours they should sleep, and you kind of have this tendency to be worrying more about it.
Yeah. Definitely, and we see that in this common model that we have to describe the development of chronic insomnia. We call it the 3P model. And so we start off with these predisposing factors, and some of them, it might just be a different belief system about sleep. We might just have placed more importance on sleep. We might have been raised in a family where sleep was something that was talked about a lot, and maybe we were told that we must go to bed now, you must get out of bed now, you must get a certain amount of sleep. We might have more anxiety. We might be really strong night owls or really strong morning larks, so we might be more susceptible to some sleep disruption. So I think there are definitely some factors there that can predispose us or kind of lift us closer to that bar of insomnia. And then we have, I may as well talk about the last two now, so otherwise people will ask me. Then we have the second P, which is just the precipitating events, whatever triggered that temporary sleep disruption, that initial sleep disruption. It can be really hard to pinpoint that, and it's often not very helpful because we can't eliminate every potential source of sleep disruption from our lives. Normally, more than 9 times out of 10, our sleep just gets right back on track all by itself. But when it doesn't, it's almost always down to that last P, which is these perpetuating factors, which is all the changes to our thought processes around sleep and all the behaviors that we completely understandably implement in a bid to improve our sleep, to control our sleep, to protect our sleep. that actually backfire on us and make sleep more difficult, because all those thoughts and behaviors can end up lowering our natural sleep drive, our drive to sleep. They can disrupt our body clock, and they can lead to heightened arousal. And when we have high levels of arousal, we usually need to generate more sleep drive, be awake for even longer to help overpower that arousal and generate sleep.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because I remember at some point I was, yes, obviously not at some point, during the whole time I was talking to my husband and trying to get some support from him, which obviously wasn't easy for him because he belongs to this other group of people.
Right.
So no predisposition, nothing that triggered. He never had this insomnia thing, you know. And he even, because I was thinking at some point, okay, maybe, you know, this relaxation or you know, you have a lot of what's the name, AMSR or something.
Mm-hmm.
Those videos where people either cut through some sponge with a knife, like very slowly, or something going on with like some little pearls, or it can be sand. I don't know. Like you usually see on those videos of YouTube, like fingers moving through some material, and it's kind of relaxing to watch those. But like I remember I was trying different things like just to relax before bed, and I remember I asked him, "What do you do actually something special?" You know, I asked him, and oh god, his face was like, oh. Like he didn't know what to tell me. He was like, I don't know. You just close your eyes, you go to bed, and then, you know, he's not even thinking. And then this also helped a little bit to kind of realize or to validate what you were saying in your videos, being sleep is natural and there is no need to control anything around it, and it happens naturally. And this was kind of a validation, because for those kind of people belonging to this other group where they're just naturally good sleepers, like they're not doing anything. And yeah, it helped me to let go a bit of this wish to control everything, because yeah, it wasn't working, obviously.
Yeah, it can be. I think that can be really powerful, is just asking someone who we know doesn't have any issues with sleep, what's your secret? What do you do to make sleep happen? You know, and I get emails from people, how do I make myself fall asleep? What do I do when I get into bed to make sleep happen? You know, we can't. It's that very act of trying that is the challenge, that is that obstacle to sleep happening. You know, the less we get involved, the easier sleep becomes. And I think that something else you mentioned, which I think is really worth emphasizing, is that even today, sometimes if you're out late, for example, you might think, oh, if I stay out, this might mean I've only got like 6 hours left to get sleep, or less time. And I think that the reason I wanted to emphasize that is because that's normal and natural. It's just the brain looking out for us. Our brain is kind of hardwired. Our brain is hardwired to protect us at the end of the day. So it's always going to consider what the worst possible scenario might be. You know, it's kind of like if we were living in a cave and we see a bunch of people from a tribe that we didn't know way off in the distance. The person that passed on their genes successfully, their brain told them, don't go down there. We don't know those people. Stay in the cave. The brain of the person that didn't get to pass down their genes probably said, yeah, go down. We don't know who those people are. Let's go say hi to them. Went down there, probably got boiled in a big cauldron and eaten. So, you know, our brain is, we are here, we are all here today, every single one of us, because our brain is really cautious. It wants to give us the worst possible outcome in our mind, because that's its protection mechanism. It's always going to be doom and gloom, priority number one. That's how it protects us. And so we don't want to prevent that from happening. We don't want to try and push those thoughts away or fight them or avoid them, because it's futile. It's just our brain trying to protect us. We're always going to have thoughts. Some of them are going to be happy, nice thoughts. Some of them are going to be unpleasant thoughts, but they are just thoughts. So we don't have to react to them. We don't have to fight them. We don't have to try and avoid them. Sometimes it's helpful to just recognize, oh, there's that thought. I'm only going to have 5 hours to get to sleep tonight, but here I am out doing things that are important to me, that are meaningful to me, that are enriching my life. Maybe that's worth more than getting an extra hour or two of sleep tonight.
Yeah, that's good. I'm gonna keep this with me for if it happens again, because I was thinking if those thoughts begin and like you engage in this, and you really, I was thinking, oh, okay, anxiety might come back, and this is when I'll be again maybe self-monitoring my sleep or something like this. So it's good to say this and emphasize on this, that you should not engage. You just acknowledge, okay, this is a thought, but not try to too much think, okay, so anxiety is maybe coming back, or oh, maybe, okay, I'm going to be aroused now as soon as I go to bed, and my arousal system will be like not aroused, you know what I mean, my arousal system will go on, and I will, all these symptoms we usually have. So this is why I think this is a very difficult part in not perpetuating your problem, even if it happens once in a while here and there. Just, I think, as you said, not engaging too much with this thought, just acknowledging it. And because what I do now, obviously I do have sometimes trouble falling asleep, but it's very, very rare. It maybe happened only twice in the last couple of months. And what I did is, when I noticed, and this is also something I had from your online course, was if you feel bad, like if you're anxious or angry or even frustrated, any bad emotion you might have while you are lying in bed, then you should get out of it. And this is what I do. And I'm practicing this from where I am now. Like, this is great. So I would just stand up, like go out of my bedroom, go down, maybe even watch some TV, which also was interesting because from the sleep hygiene, you should not do that, or they say you shouldn't. But actually, when you are an insomniac or struggling with insomnia, you just do that, and you de-stress, and you won't think about your insomnia, which is your main problem, I think. So I go down in the living room, and I would watch maybe some TV, or even on my phone. I actually don't read. I do something else. I have a book there, so if it happens, I can just read. And usually, just falling asleep there will solve my problem. Meaning, I will wake up maybe after an hour or two, because I know either the TV is still on, or my light is on and my book is on me, or you know what I mean? Like, I just fell asleep slept a few hours. And then this is something I cannot explain, but I think it's due to the fact that I'm relaxed, Then I go back to bed because I think, okay, it's more comfortable in my couch. So I do this. I go back, even if it's already 4 a.m. or something, I go back, and I always fall back asleep. And I was thinking, wow, this is interesting. This shows just the fact that, if you're thinking about sleep and you're stressed, and, this pressure you're putting on yourself doesn't work. And just removing that, even walking, going up the stairs on the other floor, like where you think, I might be wide awake now. Not at all. I think I fall asleep in a second, And this is another validation for me that it's just natural, and you really don't need to think about it, control it. Just let go of all those things you're doing, and going back to my bedroom, the stress is gone, because I know, because there's this kind of knowing, I can sleep, my body can do that. So actually, I'm just going to go back, and it works.
Yeah, exactly. If you can sleep on the couch, then you can sleep anywhere. So it shows that you can sleep. If you're one of these people that you recognize you've got that really high conditioned arousal where you seem to be able to sleep on the couch, but you can't sleep in bed as soon as you get into bed, wide awake again. Well, this just shows that maybe it's an arousal and anxiety issue rather than a sleep issue, because after all, you are recognizing that you're able to sleep somewhere else. So it shows that you can sleep, and everyone can sleep as long as they've been awake for long enough. I think that's helpful. And just having that plan in place, we said we don't have to react to all these thoughts that race through our mind. They can be unpleasant. They can make us feel uncomfortable, but we can also have a plan in place. So if being in bed really starts to feel unpleasant, we're tossing and turning, we just don't feel good, conditions don't feel right for sleep, then we might as well get out of bed and just do anything that might make being awake a bit more pleasant compared to staying in bed and struggling. And that could involve watching TV, might involve reading. Doesn't really matter too much what we do, because our goal isn't to make sleep happen, because we can't control sleep. It's just to make being awake a bit more pleasant. But it comes with that bonus that we're not reinforcing that conditioned arousal. We're not reinforcing that association or that idea that the bed is an awful place to be, because we're getting out of bed whenever it doesn't feel good to be in bed. And that can be really helpful. So I know I've taken a lot of your time up, and I'm really, really grateful. So I'm just going to kind of get to the last question, which is the one that I like to ask everyone. And that's this. If someone with chronic insomnia is listening and feel as though they've tried everything, they're beyond help, they can't do anything to improve their sleep, what would you tell them?
Watch this podcast, watch the videos. I would tell them, honestly, I would tell them to get informed about all the things we just mentioned in this episode, but get informed about how sleep is natural, how it happens naturally, how like this knowledge, it seems so obvious to some people, and you need to go back to, like, it's something so simple, and obvious. You need to go back to this. So I would honestly try your course, which is great. This is what I thought, because I was already anticipating what will happen if this doesn't work, like already kind of thinking one step forward. And I was thinking, okay, so if the online insomnia coach doesn't help me, I'll get someone in person, I thought maybe I need this contact, this is the next step. So maybe if you feel like online stuff don't really help you, then definitely the CBTI, yes?
Yeah.
The CBTI therapy, the cognitive therapy, I would do this. And it's difficult to say, because if you had this since your whole life, it's also hard. I can understand how hard it is to imagine a different way of living or, being regards to your sleep. Because for me, I could relate to how it was before it happened, like 2 or 3 years before that. So I had the goal of kind of going back to this detached, just relaxed person I was regarding sleep. And if there is where maybe, I don't know, if you're really struggling since you're a kid or a teenager or something, I guess it's really important to have somebody help you or follow you, like coach you basically with this, and to know that you're not alone. I would say this is one really important thing, knowing that there are other people struggling, and maybe even people who are not willing to talk about this because they know that this triggers them or contributes to their own anxiety, and which is something I couldn't understand. And now I do a bit. And I think this is important. If you have those people, find someone else maybe who can talk to you about this and use those platforms. You also have, I think, one, I didn't use this one, but like I think there's a forum or something where you can also ask questions and like talk to other people who have those. I think this helps to feel supported, to not be lonely, and to be reminded you're not having a uniquely wrong issue. It's something, insomnia is very similar. And it's natural. Like this word, it happens naturally. Sleep happens naturally. Everybody can sleep. This is like, you print it out. I was thinking also, I did this on my fridge. Like, like you can print it out somewhere, put it, and there's have a constant reminder of those things until you integrate them in your brain, your body. You really have the knowing from the inside, not just somebody telling you. You need to kind of really, integrate this information. And I think then you're really cured, because I think everybody can be cured. I mean, it's obviously everybody can sleep. It's natural. Yeah. It's funny. I wish I had all this information when it started, because I would have saved a lot of money buying my pills and everything I did, consultations, and would have been sleeping better earlier. So don't waste your time trying other things. Just
I think that's something I hear a lot, is I wish I'd found out about all of this sooner. It's very common that people feel that way, and obviously it's understandable. But I think the great thing is, the past is the past, but what matters is the present. And now you do know all these techniques. And just talking to you, you can just tell that your whole relationship with sleep has just changed. But if sleep issues ever happen again in the future, you're in a completely different place now. You know way more about sleep. You know specific techniques that have proven to be helpful. You can just pull them out of your back pocket and just implement them again if needed. So maybe you've come out of this even stronger. You're now more resilient, more confident. So maybe in a way, maybe it's a bit of a stretch, but maybe there is even a glimmer of a silver lining to this whole experience.
Oh, I believe in that. I'm working actually as a healer, energetic work and stuff like this. And I do believe that all experiences have actually a good purpose for us. We learn something from even the bad stuff. So yeah. I would agree. This is definitely, and even just by talking to some friends, I didn't know they had this. And I recommended also your podcast, your videos and everything. And I think even just being able to help other people who are maybe not talking, but still like 9 p.m. thinking I need to go to bed and like everything's a bit stressed around this bedtime thing. There's, helping others, and yeah.
That's great. All right. I think that's a great note to end on. So thanks again for being such a great guest and sharing your experience. It's been great to talk to you, Jovana.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Insomnia Coach podcast. If you're ready to implement evidence-based cognitive and behavioral techniques to improve your sleep, but think you might need some additional support and guidance, I would love to help. There are 2 ways we can work together. First, you can get my online coaching course. This is the most popular option. My course combines sleep education with individualized coaching and is guaranteed to improve your sleep. You will learn new ways of thinking about sleep and implement better sleep habits over a period of 8 weeks. This gives you time to build sleep confidence and notice results without feeling overwhelmed. You can get the course and start right now at insomniacoach.com/online. I also offer a phone coaching package where we start with a 1-hour call. This can be voice only or video, your choice, and we come up with an initial 2-week plan that will have you implementing cognitive and behavioral techniques that will lead to long-term improvements in your sleep. You get unlimited email-based support and guidance for 2 weeks after the call, along with a half-hour follow-up call at the end of the 2 weeks. You can book the phone coaching package at insomniacoach.com/phone. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Insomnia Coach podcast. I'm Martin Reed, and as always, I'd like to leave you with this important reminder. You can sleep.